Good afternoon to all the crypto enthusiasts out there. After a long break, practically we're continuing our English channel. As you might already know, this is the Crypto Game Media Macedonian channel, which has its own English version, where we're going to practically discuss everything regarding crypto, geopolitics, and macroeconomics. So in this case, today, since I wanted to find a proper, let's say, subject to start our channel with, this is going to be, I think, a very good subject to start with. We're talking about the US election, which needs to be held on the 5th of November. And we want to see what kind of effects they will have on the macroeconomics of the world, then geopolitics, and obviously the most important, what kind of effect they will have on the crypto. Although not everybody is a crypto investor, maybe you're a Bitcoin investor, but in any case, I believe that you're going to have fun with this video. Now, first and most important, I would like to explain how practically they do it. Because I can imagine most of the people that are not from US have difficulty understanding how this, let's say, very complicated type of system works when we're talking about electing the next US president or clown, whatever you prefer. So, in this case, first of all, the basic, let's say, conditions you need to accomplish to be practically a candidate for the presidential title in America is that you need to be born as a US citizen, then you need to have at least 35 years, and then you need to be in the last 14 years a resident of the US. So, at the beginning, maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but usually the spring, 1 year before the election, so practically it's 1.5 years since it's in the spring of the year of the actual election. There is a lot of candidates that start their, let's say, program or campaign to become the next US president. In this case, what they do, they travel across the, let's say, US, all the states of the United States of America, and they practically hold their rallies mostly for the politicians of the two major parties. We're talking about the Republican and the Democratic parties. After this part of the election is done, there are two national conventions held, one of the Republican, one of the Democratic Party, where all these, let's say, delegates from the different states of US are voting who is going to be the main candidate of the party. Obviously, one person is elected from all the candidates that are campaigning for this spot, and this person that is going to be the representative of the two major parties of America is choosing his own VP, vice president. This is called the ticket. So in this case, we have one person that is the potential president of the US who chooses his own potential vice president, which is called the ticket. So in this case, it's going to be the Trump ticket or the Harris ticket. After this is done, practically they continue campaigning all over US. What they do now, they are practically voting for the general election. Sorry, they are fighting for the general election. What they do, they are traveling all these countries of the US and they are holding their rallies to try to get as much as possible votes to be voted the next president of the US. Now, how this functions, all these United States have, depending on the population that they have, the number of the population, they have their own electoral college or electoral votes. Practically what it means is that every one of these states, depending on who has more votes for the first or the second candidate, will give all its electoral college votes for this candidate that won the general election vote. What it means, this is how it looks like on the general map of America. So every one of these states, as we already said, has their own number of population, and depending on the number of the population, has their own electoral college votes. Which means, if even for one vote, Trump wins in, let's say, Wisconsin, then has one vote more than Harris, this means that these three votes will go for Trump. Doesn't matter if this was 1 or 1 million votes difference, right? Okay. So once we understood this, we understand that the general voting, even if one of the candidates has more votes than the other, that doesn't mean he is going to win the election by itself. Because we have smaller countries that have, for example, let's say smaller territory but bigger amount of votes. might win in a big percentage, for example, for one candidate, than the other countries that have smaller, let's say, electoral vote. In this case, because they have smaller percentage of population of the US. This means that at the end of the day, one candidate might have significantly bigger amount of votes on the general election. We're talking about every person that counts. Then he still can lose because he didn't have enough countries that have electoral votes. So what is important in this case is that more and more countries you win practically a bigger amount of the share of the population that is voting for you as a candidate, as a US president. Now, yes, this is what exactly I think about the presidential election as well. This is literally voting for which clown will lead the US for the next 4 years. Why I think this, you're going to see in the next part of the video, because trust me, on the basic level doesn't change a lot. But it does change if you are out of the US and you are crypto investor. This is the main thing that we need to show you in this video. Now, the first thing I want to show you before we go into the macroeconomics of the two candidates and their promises regarding the economical questions, I want to show you that there is an enormous discrepancy when we're talking about the funds that are invested in one or the other candidate. From what we can see, Donald Trump has somewhere around 264 million invested in his campaign. And unlike him, Kamala Harris, the Democratic representative for this election, has $497 million invested. In this case, we're not talking about election. We're talking about proper marketing campaign, if you ask me. I mean, at the end of the day, unfortunately, this is how it looks like for the most democratic country in the world. But it is what it is. We're talking about candidates that are grossly over invested practically, because this is not donations, these are practical investments from giants like tech giants. We're talking Google, Microsoft, then where we have the biggest banks, obviously Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, then let's not forget the big arms producers like Boeing and Lockheed Martin. What I'm trying to say is that we're not that far from what the comedian, one of the best of all time, Robin Williams, have said. Politicians need to have their own jackets with the logos of the companies that are investing in them. No, this is not donations. These are actual investments, because these candidates will go on to practically help one way or the other with the legislation of these investors that they have to become the next presidents. But I just wanted to show you that we're talking about enormous amounts of money that are literally thrown into these campaigns, because for this kind of, let's say, big entities, it's very important which representative will win, because they will have an easier time regarding their business in the next 4 years. But let's leave that aside. Now let's talk about the actual promises that both candidates made regarding the economical part or the tax part of the their electorate. So first we'll go with Trump. This is the actual campaign, let's say, proposals for the 2024 elections, which were given 26th of August. Same goes for Kamala Harris. In this case, what we can see is that we're not going to into details, obviously, because again, this is not for the US electorate. We are not going into these details. What we're going to see is that both candidates have a massive problem, which is called the US debt, which is the main reason why we are investing in the crypto industry, because the opposite of what they're doing is helping practically the investments that we're doing in the crypto market. Why do I say this? So first of all, what we need to understand is that both these candidates are massively, let's say, enlarging their deficit of the budget of US. Why am I saying this? Both candidates have programs which are massively interested in lowering the tax brackets for every US citizen. Doesn't matter if it's citizen that doesn't make 2,000 euros, $2,000 per month, or citizen that makes $2 million per month. Why am I saying this? Except for the last, let's promise that they have for the corporate part of the industry, corporate part of the economics in US, the rest are literally for mostly likely general citizens and small companies. In these cases, we can see that in all these different promises, doesn't matter if it's Harris or Trump, they're trying to lower, let's say, the tax payments that the general people are doing in small companies to the US government. With this, they're actually making it more difficult for the government of US to pass through an year where they need to find enough money to cover the deficits that are appearing because of this lowering of the taxes. The only difference, as I was saying, is the corporate income tax, where Trump wants to lower the corporate income tax from 21% to 15%, which means he's going to make it even worse for the deficit of the country. Because on 1 year, let's say, for the economy of US to work, we have a situation where you need to have enough money collected from taxes to cover all the expenses that the government has for every citizen of the country, right? We're talking decades now that the US have never had enough money to cover all the expenditures that they have as a government for every person in the state. We're going to show this part now, but the difference is that, unlike Trump, Harris wants to do it the other way around, although she wants to make it higher for the corporations regarding the tax that they need to pay to US, from 21% to 28%. So in this case, we have a very big difference about what we are going to have as a deficit long term in the US economy. Trust me, this is very connected to your crypto portfolio. We're going to explain how. Now, in the next 10-year, let's say, time frame, we can see that this kind of policy that Trump has roughly will raise the deficit of the budget by $5.8 trillion on a yearly basis. Unlike that, we can see that there will be raising of the deficit in the let's say promises or economic scheme that Harris is proposing by only by $1.2 trillion. Now, if you ask me, as big as the deficit gets, as better for our portfolios. Let's see why. Now, this is how it looks like regarding the deficit from, let's say, we're going to from the 1980s to today. We can see that with a small brief moment on the 2000s, we can see that constantly the deficit on the budget of America is growing. Very important for us. Why? Bigger the deficit, bigger the amount that US needs to borrow from companies and, let's say, citizens, not only from US, but from around the world, and from its own Federal Reserve. Now, why is this important? First, we can see how it looks like regarding the spending that the American government does, and the tax collection that I was just talking about. So, what we can see is that both candidates, that's why I said we're talking about which clown will lead the US economy, both candidates are actually proposing that they continue growing the debt on the governmental or state level. Why am I saying this? We can see that from 2000 onwards, the spending of the government is always bigger than what they collect with taxes, which means that they are constantly growing the deficit. Okay, we can see that Harris's proposal, or the economic scheme that Harris proposes, raises the deficit lower than Trump, but that's not a solution, which means that projectively the deficit will only continue to grow onwards, which means that US needs to continue growing their debt. And we're talking about completely unsustainable path of growth for the debt of US, which means that we're talking literally, if you see this chart on a meme coin, you would think it's completely normal, right? Because it's a meme coin, so if we have an inflation, it's completely fine. But if you see it on the US economy, which is supposed to be the biggest economy in the world, Not really so much, right? And let's not forget that this is adjusted for the second quarter of 2024, where the third quarter is still not represented in this debt. Let me tell you, the current debt of America is $35.8 trillion, which means that the national debt will only grow. That's why I'm saying which clown will lead this circus in the next 4 years. Because no matter which clown was leading this country, from the 1980s onward, we can see that their debt was growing exponentially more and more and more. Doesn't matter who comes into power, it's going to be the same regarding the macroeconomics of this country. Which means, in the same time, they need to also pay a lot bigger amount for the interest of this debt. I mean, can you imagine if we see currently how the budget looks like of America? So this year, 2023, which is the last one, the budget is $6.5 trillion just to pass the year, from which they have managed to collect only $4.5 trillion, which means they need to find additional $2 trillion just to pass this year. And on top of all this, from the amount of debt that they have collected, which is, as we were saying, we're talking about 35.8 trillion to the third quarter of 2023. They are paying 1 trillion only in interest. So on these 2 trillions deficit, they need to add 1 trillion that they need to also find from somewhere to pay only to service this debt, not to start paying it. No. Only to service this debt, they need to find additional $1 trillion, which means they will not be able to find this money constantly from outside of the US and inside, where any kind of general citizen, company, corporation can practically borrow the money to US. They need to start doing it through the Federal Reserve. Now, unfortunately, we are talking about this extensively on our Macedonian channel, and we are going to come to the point to talk about it in the English channel as well, our Crypto Slavia channel. But step by step, we are going to have proper courses with all that you need to know regarding the, first of all, monetary policy of America and their world reserve currency, the dollar, and how is that connected directly to your crypto investments. Now, here is going to be a small piece of the puzzle. Now, what we are seeing over here is that the quantitative easing process, which is implemented by the Federal Reserve, which practically controls the total monetary supply of dollars around the world, is practically the instrument with which only America can borrow endless amount of money, as we can see over here in the meme coin chart, where what they do is practically the Federal Reserve is buying bills, bonds, notes, although these are any kind of types of, let's say, debt that the government of America can issue, and for this amount of money, for this amount of debt, they issue a new amount of money, which they don't give directly to the government of America. That would be still illegal. Let's see how long that's going to last. What they do is they give this money to the commercial banks, which are the ones that are buying the bills, bonds, and notes from the government of America, and for exchange, they are actually giving these notes to the Federal Reserve, for which they get additional amount of newly printed dollars. So in this case, what we do see is constantly growing amount of dollars printed and practically put in the market, right? What does this mean? The more you borrow from the Federal Reserve, which in addition is getting these bills, bonds, and notes and printing more, let's say, bigger amount of dollars and injecting in the system through the commercial banks, you are practically devaluating the US dollar. So this chart that we can see, where in the last 50 years, they have printed enormous amount of, I call them green toilet paper, or you call them the reserve currency named dollar. We are having a situation where they have devaluated in the last 100 years because of the printing of money. So from 1913 to today, the 2020, not even taking in consideration the last 4 years where they also printed a big amount of money, they have managed to devaluate the value of $1 for 99%. So the dollar has lost 99% of their buying power. So what you were able to buy in 1913 with $1, now you can buy only 1% of that amount. You understand? So if you were able to buy, let's say, 100 burgers with $1, now you are able to buy only one burger. Even one burger is too much for $1 these days. You can buy a napkin maybe in McDonald's. Now, why is this important? This is a little bit sophisticated chart, but I think you're going to understand it very easily. What you see here on a macro level is the value of the dollar represented by the DXY index. Additionally, I'm going to delete these two charts so you see it a little bit more clear before we continue on that part. I have added over here the amount printed in dollars. This is the M2 supply, as they call it in America. So we can see that over time, as they were printing a bigger amount of dollars, we can see that there is a general trend of lowering the value of the dollar itself through the DXY index. Now, on top of this, if we do add the gold price, we're going to add the Bitcoin price against the dollar, and we're going to add the S&P 500 price. What we're going to get is, we're going to see that by the same amount of printed money and injected in the system, we're talking about the dollars, we saw falling practically value of the dollar itself, but we saw a raising of the prices of the S&P 500 index, the gold index, and the Bitcoin price. Why is this so? Because when you devalue the amount that the dollar is in value, you practically make everything else more expensive. In this case, if you hold your portfolio in anything except for the dollar, you would have protected yourself against inflation or devaluation of the dollar and this uncontrolled printing of money. So it means that in the last, let's say, 20 years, 24 years since 2000, you would have had more success holding anything else except for the green toilet paper, which you call dollar. As you can see over here, doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin, doesn't matter if it's S&P 500, gold, everything is a lot higher in price since the 2000s, just because in this case we have an enormous uncontrolled printing of dollars. Or as Michael Saylor would say,
what do you do with the Bitcoin besides it just gather value?
Real estate developers in New York City, they're not buying the real estate because they want to live in it.
But like most of the people who are buying assets at some point want to sell the assets at a profit.
People that use fiat currency as a store of value, we call them poor. We call them poor.
Mislim da kao je dosta jasno. Sorry, I switched there on Macedonian for a second. I think it's quite clear what he wanted to say in this situation, right? So, people that use fiat currency as a store of value, we call them poor. Why? This is why. Because if you held anything, doesn't matter if it's dollar, euro, or any other type of fiat currency, you would have been a lot poorer than holding anything else in the last 20 years. Now, what I want to reflect on all this that have been said until now regarding the macroeconomics and the policies of the two candidates for a main clown of the US is literally that. No matter what they do, the debt of America will grow, the printing of money will grow, the DXY or dollar devaluation of value will continue, and everything else will grow in price. You understand? Will grow in value. So what you can take out of this, let's say, part of the presentation is that no matter what happens, both clowns will play the same thing. As we can see, never in the history of America, nobody have ever tried to do something about the debt, which means in this case, we're on the right path, no matter who becomes president, to continue this debt spiral of debt and interest rates of America and devaluation of the dollar, which practically is the best play for anything except for the dollar in your portfolio. So enjoy it. Now, the second important part which you need to discuss is the global geopolitical scheme. Why am I saying this? Both presidential candidates have different views regarding the two global, let's say, main global conflicts that we are currently facing. This is the Ukrainian-Russian war and the Israeli everybody war. So in this case, the first one, which is, let's say, a little bit less to differentiate, to explain, is the Ukrainian-Russian war, in which Donald Trump, in several occasions until now, have pledged to finish this war the moment he comes into office. Obviously, this is not going to go very fast. Obviously, it's going to take time for this to actually happen. But in this case, in this situation, Ukraine is so much in debt to the Western powers, doesn't matter if it's US or the European Union or NATO, that in this case, because they lost the right to negotiate with Russia when they forfeited the Turkish negotiations for peace, we're talking about a situation where literally Donald Trump will be negotiating for Ukraine's future. Unfortunately, this is the truth. I don't care if you like it or not. This is the actual truth, how it's going to happen. On the other hand, if we have the other candidate win, then we're going to have a situation where, unfortunately, this war will continue going on, and obviously there will be more lives lost, and it's going to be more complications, and practically is going to make the general macroeconomics heavier for the whole world. Why am I saying this? Because Russia and Ukraine are the biggest producers of grains. In the same time, Russia is the biggest producers of natural gas and one of the biggest producers of oil. So, the longer you continue with this crisis, the longer you make this kind of supply chains around the world heavier, harder, more complicated, sanctions, etc., etc. We're not going to go into details because this video is not regarding that. But if you ask me, in this case, Donald Trump is the better option, and hope he's going to win regarding this, because stopping of one global war can lead to this. I always use this chart because it's quite clear and it can explain everything you need to know regarding global conflicts and how it affects their start and end to the actual markets. We know that every time that a global conflict starts, usually we have a dump. So we have a situation where the market starts being afraid, especially if we're talking about countries that are like this: the biggest grain producer, the biggest oil producer, the biggest gas producer, etc., etc. So in this case, when we have starting of conflicts like the World War I, World War II, Vietnam conflict, we can see fall and stagnation of the markets long term while this conflict lasts. The moment these conflicts finish, we can see enormous growth of the markets themselves. Now, I do use the Dow Jones index, which is one of the oldest index that is kept track of. And that's why I'm using this to show you that any end of global conflict usually is very good for the markets. So ending one global conflict that is plaguing the planet right now will be very good for our portfolios. Now, this, you can forget about this part because this is the big depression in the world. So this is a different economical, let's say, subject. But generally, if we take this part of the equation or the chart away, we can see that the rest is very positive for the markets in general. So ending of this conflict about, let's say, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which we are not going to go into, is going to be very good for our portfolios long term. So let's hope that this is going to happen, because ending one conflict is going to be positive for the crypto market. You understand? Not only for the crypto market, as we can see for any kind of index, any kind of market in general in the world. Now, unfortunately, we cannot say the same for the Israeli conflict with everybody else, since Israel is waging war on everybody currently. Israel is literally bombing more than 5 states in the Middle East. But forget about that part. What is important in this case is that both of the candidates are literally competing who is going to support Israel more, unfortunately, on the subject, which is a very, very bad news for us. So, unfortunately, this is the case and we cannot do anything about it. Any of these candidates is bad news of the for the market if we're talking about stopping the war in the Middle East. Both candidates are literally now competing who is going to send more money, more weapons, kill more innocent civilians, etc., etc. Unfortunately, this is not good for your portfolio. But if we need to compare in this case, Trump is a better option because one less global conflict, which is potentially leading to a third world war, is better than no global conflicts stopped. Because Harris promises to continue with the war against Russia, because this is an actual NATO war against Russia. So unfortunately, this is going to be very bad for the cycle itself if Harris wins. Just for you to understand why is this so important. So the taking of power of the next president of America, no matter who wins, is going to be around January of 2025. Now over here you can see overlaying the last 3 cycles of Bitcoin through their 4-year journey through the Bitcoin halving, right? So we can see that every time that there was a new president in office in America, it led to a massive bull market in the 2016 bull market, 2012 bull market, and the 2020 bull market. So in this case, we're actually expecting that the overall election of president in America will be very positive for the markets in general. As we can see, these have been seen 3 times so far in the Bitcoin cycle. Now, unfortunately, also we need to consider that both candidates are pro continuing the alliance of NATO, which is destabilizing the world as we speak. And unfortunately, in this case, as we can see, Kamala Harris is a lot more pro-NATO, so they will completely support NATO, they will completely support the hegemony of this, let's say, organization around the world, as we can see, unlike Trump, which actually is requesting reforms. Why am I saying this? First, if you remember, a year ago, Trump actually threatened to leave NATO because the European countries are not covering their part of the bill for all this warmongering around the world. Forget about that part. If you ask me, Trump is a better option because he's going to keep the, let's say, warmongering as much as possible at bay, except for the Middle East. I'm going to say again, Trump was the one that actually decided to kill Qasem Soleimani, the biggest general of the Iranian army, and I think that he's going to continue with the same tempo if we're discussing the Middle East. But everything else, I think Trump is a better choice on geopolitics, which will lead to less wars, even potentially finishing of a war, which will lead to less global conflict and more prosperity regarding anything you invest in, especially crypto. Now we're coming to the main part when we're going to discuss what these 2 candidates have to offer regarding the crypto industry, especially in the US. Now in this case, it's a lot clearer who is going to be the favorite candidate of all the crypto investors around US and around the world, to be honest, because by example, everybody follows what the biggest economies are doing, in this case, the US. Now, throughout his campaign, I have managed to collect all the promises he have made regarding the crypto industry and the crypto investors, which are enormously important regarding choosing who is going to be the next main clown in US. The first and most important is practically stopping the Operation Choke Point 2.0. What this means, usually most of you maybe know, maybe you don't, but this is a special type of operation which started in March 2023, where the 3 major banks collapsed in America, and they practically put all this, let's say, the guilt was unanimously given to the crypto sector. Practically what they are doing currently is stopping the entities in US which are working. Doesn't matter if it's Coinbase, doesn't matter if it's Circle or Binance or whoever, to have any kind of banking services. So Choke Point 2.0 is practically a special operation where Gary Gensler, the chairman of the SEC, in coordination with the Democratic government, Genocide Joe and the rest, is trying to strangle the crypto industry in the US. Trump is practically promising to stop this immediately when he comes into power. Let's not forget that the main actor of the Choke Point 2.0 operation is Gary Gensler, which Trump is, in this case, promising to fire on the first day in office. Hopefully this is going to happen. Trust me, the whole community of crypto investors will be very happy to hear this news. Let's hope it's going to happen. In the same time, let's not forget that there are a lot of laws regarding stablecoins, crypto in general, stopping the Choke Point 2.0 operation, which are now stuck in Congress. And Trump is practically hoping that he is going to make it easier for this legislation to be finished and finally implemented, so there is clear regulation regarding crypto. Right now, something like that doesn't exist in US, so let's hope that he's going to win. Let's not forget the current administration, starting with Genocide Joe. he literally vetoed a proposal from the Congress to stop the choke point 2.0 operation. So let's hope that he's going to win regarding this, that the whole industry will get. Let's not forget his promise to make a strategic Bitcoin stockpile, which means that he is going to make sure that the 200 and more thousand Bitcoins that the US government currently hold will not be sold like the example that Germany made right now on the market. Hopefully that's going to happen. And he also promised that anything additionally that will come into US's hands regarding Bitcoin will stay as currently they have a oil strategic reserve. He's planning to do something like a Bitcoin strategic reserve, which will long-term benefit the US if they're smart enough, but not in general, to be honest. But also let's not forget that in this situation he also promised that he is going to do everything he can to make America lead in the mining of Bitcoin part of the industry. So what he means by this is he is going to do everything he can to make it easier for the big giant of Bitcoin mining to stay or come and work in America long term. Obviously, this is smart from his part. This guy is literally running America like it's a corporation. So depends how you look at it. It's positive or negative. In my case, anything that goes bad for America goes good for the crypto and anything else that you invest in. So in this case, if you ask me, no matter which clown wins, we win in general. Also, let's not forget that he is also pro self-custody, which means that he wants to guarantee the right of every citizen of the US to self-custody its own crypto. Doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin, doesn't matter if it's altcoins. The importance is that in this case we're going to have a situation where every citizen in the US will have a legislative way of self-custodying itself. Let's not forget this is already guaranteed. Doesn't matter if they like it or not. Anybody that has their own cold wallet is effectively protected against anything that the government can do to you and your capital gains regarding crypto. But anyway, this is good. Let's not forget this is very positive. And in the same time, let's not forget Trump's pledge that he is not going to allow any kind of legislation regarding CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, which long term is very good, not only for the US, but for the whole population of the world, because CBDC is literally the evil twin of the blockchain technology, which is here to control everything on a state level by one entity. Doesn't matter if it's the central bank or if it's the Federal Reserve or is the government or whoever. We're talking about complete financial lockdown of the whole nation. Unfortunately, unlike Trump, we didn't hear any promises from Kamala Harris. The only thing we heard is in one of her representations, or I don't know, some kind of rally. She mentioned something about giving boost to crypto, i.e. in any kind of tech, let's say, industry in US, which is not enough. This is not how you explain to the crypto investors why they need to vote for you, especially since in the US there is more than 50 million crypto investors, which accounts for 1/6 of the whole population of the US. So let's see how she's gonna go with it. But in the same time, since Ripple co-founder have pledged to invest $10 million into XRP tokens, coins, for her campaign, there is something obviously that we don't know. Why am I saying this? Let's not forget that Ripple was the first victim of the genocide Joe government, where 3 years now Ripple company is in court with SEC regarding invented rules that don't exist about industry that is new. We're not going to go into it. What I'm saying is, if the co-founder of Ripple decided to invest $10 million into campaign of the vice president of the president that put the legislation and the choke point 2.0 operation against crypto and put Ripple in the courts for the next 3 years, it means there is something we don't know. Why am I saying this? Let's not forget that Kamala Harris had a private meeting with most of the big tech companies regarding crypto. We're talking Circle, we're talking Coinbase, we're talking Ripple, where they discussed some things that are never made public from this discussion. And from this, I would say again, nobody just decides to give $10 million to a government that is currently trying to close your company. So there is something that we don't know. In all, we cannot be sure who's going to win, because unfortunately, no matter how many polls are done, no matter how many let's say votes, whatever, until we get the final vote, we cannot know what will be the decision of the American people, who is going to be the next clown to lead them. Since October 26, we have several polls that are practically undecided. As you can see, some of them are let's say bigger chance for Trump, others are bigger chance for Harris, but in general I think that Trump victory will be a lot better for the crypto industry overall, for the crypto industry and for macroeconomics and geopolitics. Macroeconomics, because it's going to make the debt of America bigger, he's going to devalue the dollar even more. With this, he's going to make our crypto portfolios grow even faster. Geopolitics, because he's going to at least close one global conflict, and let's see what's going to happen with the other one. And the third one, since he's promising a lot more regarding the crypto industry. And just for you to have an idea how it looks, so this is the Bitcoin halving, and this is the election of US. Every time there is an election, we have a massive Bitcoin bull cycle, including altcoin cycle, obviously. Doesn't matter if it's 2012, 16 or 20th. Now we're in the 24 elections, which is going to be the fourth time that we are going to experiencing this kind of growth. Now, I can imagine this is going to be none of this is obviously financial advice. I'm not telling you that you need to buy crypto or buy anything else. This is just my view of the market, and this is just what I do on the market regarding investments and expectation of the next bull market. I hope that you enjoyed this video. At the end of the day, this is just a start. Trust me, on the Macedonian channel we have more than 1,200 videos, of which half of them are educational content regarding macroeconomics, blockchain technology and geopolitics. So we're trying to put everything that you will need for investments in one spot, and I hope that you will enjoy following our work. For you to find our work, you just need to write Crypto Slavia, and this is our Facebook page. Obviously, in our Facebook page you are going to find everything you need to find about our YouTube channel, about our Twitter and Instagram profile, and obviously in the description of this video you can find all the information regarding following our work from this point onwards. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video, broadcasting from the guerrilla radio, our guerrilla education, to the 99% of the world. Thank you, and see you next time.